everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss. We have a debate today, and we will do debate on social media. We have our world famous debater, Professor Rob and Professor David Smith. It will be open debate, so they can discuss both the side pros and cons. So first, I would like to give chance Professor Rob.
Yeah, in fact, it might be interesting to do one side being government and the other side being citizens. In other words, the perspective of the people versus the perspective of government. If David wants to do that, and then we'll both do pros and cons based on that perspective, if that works.
That's great.
David?
That works.
Yeah, okay, so I'll take the government side. From the standpoint of government, like any technology, social media is neither good or bad. It depends on how it's used. From a good standpoint, social media can be used to organize and collect the populace. It can be used to get backing for government initiatives. It can be used as a way to get a better real-time sense of what the populace is thinking about and how best to address their concerns and to best focus on the things that might get you reelected as a politician, as opposed to things that might not or might be neutral according to the populace. And you can actually use social media to change the ranking and hierarchy of the items that the populace is considering to better fit whatever your background is or whatever your interest is. In addition, social media can be a way to highlight the things the government is doing. Often, a government does a great number of things that isn't appreciated by the population simply because they don't know what's happening. And social media can be used to elevate the information surrounding those things and make people aware of what government is doing for them and make them perhaps less distrustful and antagonistic towards that government because they know it's doing good things. On the negative side, social media can be used to organize government opposition, both legal and illegal. Certainly, we've seen hostile states use social media relatively aggressively to change public opinion and to get people to vote against things that would otherwise be in their best interest. It can be used to propagate conspiracy theories that aren't true, as well as propagate conspiracy theories that are true, but telling the difference is kind of problematic. Social media, as it's currently organized, which is to maximize revenue, advertising revenue, is incentivized to do whatever it takes to increase that revenue, and sadly, that means a lot of what we currently see is things like fraudulent advertising, false news stories, conspiracy theories that also have no foundation, and it becomes kind of an echo chamber for people that are spreading bad information and information that they probably shouldn't be consuming because it's doing them harm. So on one side, it can be used to further what government wants done. On the other side, it can be used to significantly hamper the efforts of government to do their job. And so it has that side. So the right way to deal with social media then comes down to how do you regulate it? Should social media be nationalized, for instance, since it is the voice of the people to the people? Should the government control social media as a mechanism to communicate to the people and assure the quality of that communication? Government's probably pretty bad at that thing. So it'd be like government controlling the press, and the outcome would probably be dire. On the other hand, total lack of control has created the problems we have now, where foreign governments are influencing politics. And while you can certainly have a dialogue between concerned citizens, which should be allowed, having a foreign entity come in and drive that dialogue and drive the division should certainly not be allowed, specifically and especially if it leads to insurrection. Certainly promising or allowing the organization of violent revolt would be against the best interests of the people and the government, and we would stand against those activities, and regulating to make sure that doesn't happen would be predominant. So from the government perspective, we would propose that if social media is going to be allowed in the country, that then government needs to take an active role to make sure that it's being used for the good of the citizens and not for the bad. And that means things like fraudulent advertising should carry liability for the provider. False information that is provided that is knowingly false only to increase the provider's revenue should also come with a penalty, and those penalties should be extreme to mitigate the behavior. We shouldn't take too heavy a hand, because if you take too heavy a hand, you fight a free speech, and you create the potential for an autocracy, dictatorship, or monarchy, which we are not now, and we're not proposing we create one. But from the standpoint of government, social media can be used to further the goals of government, and it should be regulated so it doesn't act against those goals and harm the country. That's government's position.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Now I request Professor David Smith.
Well, Professor Rob has made some interesting points, and there's actually good and bad of some of the points he made. The role of social media, and particularly since there are hundreds of channels of social media, are very difficult to put a government regulatory approach around. Because what we've seen in some countries where they have tried to regulate social media, it's become a propaganda channel and a place of censorship for the individual citizens. But we've seen other places where, from a citizen's perspective, social media has been very beneficial because it provides an asynchronous forum to discuss the issues, to bring things to front, to form coalitions, to work with each other. Yes, there is some fake news, but if I walk through a shopping mall and listen to people having discussions around me, I hear fake news there as well, as you pick it up and see that. So part of it's a filtering mechanism. I personally am worried every time I hear someone say we're going to put regulations in place that controls the information that's presented, be it in a broadcast media, be it in a news media, be it in social media, or even in some of the emails that go through public resources. And we've seen countries even begin to censor email in some ways. That is an overreach where we see the government doing things, because it goes back and makes it very easy for them to control the communication paths. We've also seen, though, that social media has applications even in war. What has made part of the conflict in Ukraine is the use of social media and the ability to use some of the uniqueness of social media. Social media has the advantage of being global, has the advantage of being real-time or near real-time, as well as asynchronous. And that has become a way to understand the conflicts of war in ways that we've never had in the past. I mean, even when we look today at some of the more fair news media, where they have reporters out in the field, I particularly enjoy the BBC. And you look at their newscast and you can detect, even though they are one of the fairer news organizations, there's bias. There's things that you haven't seen there. Where across the social media, we see a more balanced view in some ways. And yes, part of it's propaganda, but that's part of our daily lives anyways. Other places we see some of the effects on social media, though, is that because of all of the advantages of social media, we also understand that it can be a waste of time for people, and that people tend to spend either very little time on it or too much of time on it, because there's a concept called FOMO that is used across social media a lot. And FOMO stands for the fear of missing out. And that's one of the things that social media has helped done, is it actually has helped expand the knowledge base of a lot of individuals, because they're getting more of a diversity of opinion. We're seeing dialogue on social media that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. And a great example to me yesterday and today in my social media feeds is there's been a very good debate about the bill that was in Congress that got voted down trying to deal with the gasoline situation in the United States. And on one hand, some people attacked it. On the other hand, when they went back and read the bill, they began to understand that it was really one that didn't address all the problem. It addressed the concept of overreaching government regulations, but it ignored the marketplace considerations, it ignored the other ways to handle it. And I think the dialogue on social media will make the rewrite of that bill so much better to address a broader brush of the problems that the government and the citizens are having on that, as opposed to just a government regulatory overreach. And those are some of the challenges you see with social media. The other thing from a citizen standpoint is it's helped citizens understand the group outside of their immediate sphere of influence. Social media early days was kind of promoted as to be able to reach out to your extended family, to reach out to the people you went to school with, and more. But it has become much more than that. It's become a place where ideas are freely exchanged and debated. It's become a place where you can see what other people's interests are, and you can expand your interest by dealing with that. I would hate to see the government become very heavily regulated of it to very narrowly define what could be used on social media, or how many social media activities can you do. You know, can I do Twitter? Can I do Snapchat? Can I do LinkedIn? Can I do Facebook? Can I do Discord? Can I do all the other ones? Or am I restricted to one or two different social media outlets? You know, I have friends who are on Instagram and nothing else. And if I want to go and work with them and see what they're doing, I have to go there. Same with Snapchat and others. So it's a complicated mix because social media has grown to be much larger than just one or two channels. So from the opposition side, from the citizen side, I think we need to understand and do more education to put more tools in place that individuals can use to filter the content, as opposed to putting strict government regulations in place that will, in time, stifle the ability to freely communicate. So that is the opposition's point.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Now I request Professor Donald.
Well, I think that it's sometimes we can say things that kind of disguise the subtleties of what's going on. And so I think the idea of censorship and fake news are kind of words that say a lot, but they basically hide what's going on. And I think I'm going to give some examples because I'm pretty familiar with just 3 of the networks. Basically, really, I have like 12,000 Twitter followers and 5,000, which is maximum Facebook friends. And I rarely use LinkedIn, but I have something like 9,000 contacts there. But I get, and oh yeah, and I love TikTok. I have some followers, but I don't really post on it. I absolutely love TikTok. And and the ones I know the best really right now are Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And there's a very interesting thing about them is that the censorship, and I put that in quotes, that takes place is actually by the users. It's not. It's basically gaming the algorithms to censor others. And the way that works is that groups of users band together to mass report people and accuse them of violating the terms of service. And when the algorithm gets these mass reports, it turns it turns off the person's account. I got booted off of Twitter for making a joke about that if Trump didn't leave office, we should we should call animal control and dart him and drag him out like we would do a wild animal that had been in the thing. And because that implied violence, the Trump people all got together and mass reported me, and I got kicked off of Twitter. And so what they do on Twitter is they create lists of people that they don't like, and then they get together, and it's the Trump people that do it. And so you have to be really careful, and you have to go and keep checking to make sure they haven't put you on lists so that they're going to attack you and get you kicked off. And they do, and so, but the algorithms work in such a way that you wind up seeing stuff that you like. So it gets to the point a lot of times that you just don't even see like the Trump people talking to each other. We call the MAGA people. They have their own world. They talk to each other. You don't even see them. And that's especially true on TikTok. Like I know there's these whole groups of people on TikToks that are Nazis and white supremacists and all of these that get together, and I never see them ever, because I just see mostly I see really, really, really smart women that have PhDs and are talking about really interesting stuff, but or really funny, and that the algorithms make that happen. So there's stuff built into it that makes it so that you're really not like engaging with lots of different people. You're actually really being kind of shunted into the people that are like you. And that's been the way since day one. That's always been a desire of social media from day one. Friendster said before there was Facebook, there was Friendster, and their goal was to be able to try and get you to find the people that were like you. And that's always been the goal. And that there's some interesting psychological things about that. And one of the things about social media is that when you get a like on one of your posts, that is a hit. You get a hit of dopamine. Okay, that's dopamine is a brain chemical that kind of gives you a little hit of pleasure. It's the same brain chemical that is released when you take cocaine or when you have sex. It's the chemical in your brain that gives you pleasure. So we're posting things and getting likes for what you post on social media is actually addicting. And so what winds up happening is that people get shunted into their own little worlds, and they start posting things that the people in their world they know are going to like, so that they're going to get likes on what it is that they're posting. And it kind of creates a situation where people start basically saying the same things to each other, because they're trying to just show off with each other. And then if you look at social media, when people get into each other's worlds, they just get nasty to each other. Like for instance, if a MAGA gets into a liberal group, they just start saying, "You're an idiot, you're stupid, you're illogical, blah blah blah," like that. And you don't know what you're talking about. just stuff like that. And it just it just deteriorates into just name calling. And so there really isn't a lot of there isn't really a lot of people exchanging back and forth. If you actually look at it, it's actually separating people. So, what can you do about this as a government? Well, I want to make another point, which is, okay, we don't want to have censorship. We don't want to control information. But what would happen if a ring of pedophiles got together and started organizing so that they could sell children? I mean, you know, would we want that to be okay? I mean, what would happen if a group of people decided that they didn't like some group, gays, blacks, Jews, whatever, and they started organizing to murder them online? Would that be okay? I mean, isn't there some point where we're saying that we've gone too far? There has to be a line somewhere, and the question is, where do we draw that line? And that's an incredibly difficult problem, because the issue of it's the examples I'm giving are extreme, but a lot of issues are moral issues that people have different opinions on. So, like abortion has gotten to be a big issue in the United States, and so people are have very strong opinions on, say, when life begins, but they're opinions, and there's no scientific way to determine which is which. So if somebody wanted to say that it's fake news to say that life begins at conception, because my opinion isn't that isn't true, well, that's an opinion. And so a vast amount of things that we think about and talk about in day-to-day life are not facts. They're opinions. They're things that we have absolutely no way of determining in a factual way. So we can't really control those kinds of things.
Hey, Donald, I'm going to jump in here really quickly and everything, if that's all right with Sharif. Glad to be back here for a minute and representing Durham, North Carolina and everything. But we was actually just doing a show on one of the networks that I'm affiliated with and all of that. And a gentleman actually brought up a very good point, kind of to the point that you are making as well, which is that if you look at the war in Ukraine, you can literally pull up pictures right now that would show Ukraine in the way that Ukraine used to be. It would not show the bomb rumble and things of that nature. And there are people that are probably looking at those pictures and they're going like, hey, I don't get it. I mean, y'all say there's a war, and I just pulled up Yahoo or Google Maps, and I saw this picture. Now, they're not thinking that the picture was taken 5-10 years ago. They're just seeing the picture and they're going like, hey, it looks like a perfectly fine city to me. I don't see the destruction and the rubble that we know is taking place. So I think that that's one of the things that takes place, is that it can be used in that way, where people can try to masquerade the picture to support their beliefs. And I do agree with you that a lot of things are opinions, and you can bring your imagery to support whatever that opinion may be. So you can definitely bring in things that can prove your points in the ways that you want them to. And one of the things that I'll bring in, just as a media expert, is that there were times that it was those images that actually brought some of the great changes that we wanted to see in the war, in the world in general. Because everybody knows that if it had not been for seeing that slain soldier during the Vietnam War, a lot of the changes would not have changed, because it was just brutal. I think Rob can attest to that, as he's of an age even a little bit older than myself and everything, and remembers the picture that I'm talking about, and all along those lines. And the same with the civil rights struggles. Definitely, if you saw those folks having hoses turned on them and having water turned on them, that probably changed the opinions of certain people, even those in the South, because there were definitely some people that were blatantly racist, and anything could have gone on with my fellow African Americans, and they would not have cared. But there were others that are good citizens and good people of good morals, and they were going like, that's not what I signed up for, and all along those lines. So that also kind of like turned people's opinion throughout the country when they saw what was happening, like on the attack on Edis Bridge and all of that, Edis Petaway Bridge, and the things along those lines. But that's just some of my immediate insights as to how propaganda can be used in such a maneuvering way. But Rob, what do you think about my examples?
Thank you. Thank you.
The other one is the orphan, or the
Yeah.
girl that had been napalmed.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
that image just like totally changed everything.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Professor Rob, if you want to go for the second round debate and rebuttal, you can. Professor Rob.
I'm glad we're doing well. So yeah, the real question comes down into it's not a question of whether or not social media needs regulation, it's how to apply it. So it's not done in a way that damages the value of the property. And there's the rub. David Smith pointed out rightly that in places like China and Russia, where social media is being heavily regulated and constrained, it's basically a voice of the government. It's propaganda, and where it's allowed. But I think from the government standpoint, you can also see that's not really working. If you heavily regulate something and you make it untrustworthy, then the people are going to find a way around it. And clearly in Russia, folks that have Starlink receivers are able to get it, and everybody and their brother is supposedly sending messages through any medium that they can about what's actually happening in Ukraine and trying to get the news in, and that creates massive distrust for government. And creating massive distrust for government isn't in the government's best interest nor in the best interest of the country. And government is really supposed to act in the best interest of its citizens. And so over-regulating social media would not be in the best interest of citizens, and not something this government would support. On the other hand, the examples that Donald and Mark have given with regard to the misuse of information, showcasing the Ukraine in pristine shape, even though it's not, pedophiles organizing and creating sales markets would be problematic. On a whole number of fronts. And I think it comes down just to looking at how we can apply our existing laws to social media and at least stop criminal activity. Just an example, I was on social media the other day, and I think 3 out of the 5 ads I looked at were fraudulent. They were people selling products. And you're not going to get the products. And I've fallen for some of these myself. I've ordered things on social media that looked like they were a deal. I mean, not so much of a deal that they were obviously fraudulent, but then you either don't get anything or you get something that clearly was. I mean, you paid 75. In my case, I paid $75 for something that was supposedly on sale, typically $200 off season though. So it looked like it was kind of reasonable, and it turned out what they sent me is something that was worth about 50 cents. So clearly fraud, but not at a level where you're willing to go through the cost of trying to chase down the provider who is located outside of the U.S. And track them down. So coming up with a methodology to hold the social media companies responsible for harm they knowingly do would be the first step. If they are knowingly spreading information that they know is false and they know will harm the citizens of this country, then that should come with extreme penalties. The burden of proof would certainly have to be high, but in concert with that high burden of proof should be very high penalties that make a social media company think twice about doing what Frances Haugen testified to in U.S. Congress that Facebook was doing. In fact, testified to not only U.S. Congress, but testified to for the European Commission. As well, that Facebook was aggressively doing things that they knew was wrong in order to maximize revenue. And that practice has to be something that we do our best to outlaw. We need to disincentivize these companies for doing things that are harmful, that they know are harmful. Then we can talk about doing things or regulating things that they're doing that are bad, that they may not necessarily know are harmful. And clearly there's a gore point where the companies might aggressively try to conceal information that might inform them that the stuff is harmful in order to get away from the regulation. In other words, gaming the system. And I think we should have extreme penalties if we discover a social media company is aggressively concealing or covering up bad behavior that they otherwise would know is bad behavior. The effort of government has to be almost entirely focused on social media companies that are behaving like criminals. Whether they're a social media company or technology company or not, we should not allow criminal behavior in our country, and we have laws against crimes. We just have to figure out how to apply those laws evenly against social media companies that are placing revenue at a higher tier than the care of our citizens. At the end of the day, our goal, our purpose is to maintain the health and safety of our citizens, and anybody that acts against that health and safety, particularly a foreign company that is making tons of money off our citizens, should be held accountable, and aggressively so. So that's what the government proposes is aggressive regulation focused on known illegal behavior or supportive illegal behavior, collaborative illegal behavior by the social media companies, so they don't become a freeway for bad actors, whether they be pedophiles or warmongers or hostile states. Those activities should be outlawed, and the company's feet should be held to the fire to make sure that behavior is stopped. On the other hand, other activities like conversations and diverse views should be supported. But here, I think government should step in and play a role of participant, at least making sure that the government's voice is heard, and so the government's position is also understood. Government should not be silent on social media, which is often the case. And I mean government, not individual politicians. The government's position should be stated and clear and defensible. The government should use the social media as it's intended and therefore benefit from it. It shouldn't be something government avoids either. So a combination of intelligent regulation tied to criminal activity and active participation by government in social media to make sure its voice is heard would be what the government would propose with regard to controlling whether social media is positive or negative in terms of its impact on the country.
Hey, Rob, if I can just ask really quickly, because actually the network that I'm part of and everything has gotten into trouble with this every once in a while. What would your thoughts be about things that are of an opinion that has two sides or a dual side, and neither side can necessarily agree that they are correct? I'm actually thinking about like some COVID rules and all of that, because definitely Facebook has come out, as has, I believe, Google and others, and created these policies that, if you are saying something that is counter to what the government is saying, that they should ban you because you are saying stuff that is counter to what is going on. And it might not even be you saying it. It might be your guest saying it as well, because I know for a fact that has happened at least 2 times with Pod TV, IBM TV, as it was formerly called, and all of that, because somebody came on and made a statement around some policy or maybe even some personal experiences that they had that caused them to not want to get vaccinated and all of that. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And along those same lines, and maybe the rest of the panelists have some thoughts about this as well. I used to be very active on the Clubhouse. I mean, not as active now, and it's nothing wrong with Clubhouse. It's just that my schedule got a little bit crazier and busier, and I may get back on it more active. But I did see people giving all kinds of viewpoints on that particular app, some that were verifiable, for lack of a better word, and all of that, and some that were purely there.
Well, let's cut to the answer. So with regard to medical information, I do think that people's background should be held into account when they're providing it. We have laws against people practicing medicine without a license. Right. People that are providing diagnosis, providing medical advice, but lack the background to do so, should likely be denied their voice with regard to that information, because it could do harm. Somebody that comes in and says, hey, the right way to deal with an infection is to cut off your hand, probably not good advice. And if they're not a medical expert, then they should be denied that. Now, If they are a medical expert providing bad medical advice, then recourse should probably be with the certification board, not with the social media platform. In other words, if you've got a doctor that is providing bad advice, they carry a license, and that license can be pulled if it is found by the review board that they're providing bad medical advice. In other words, the medical institution does regulate itself, and that regulation should be applied to those experts. That's not something we should step in on, but we should ensure that those self regulating bodies are active. Should ensure that they're doing their job, and that's whether these people are acting within or without social media. We do need to assure the quality of medical health care, but rely on those bodies to do it. David had a comment.
Yeah, Mark, I actually can give you a firsthand experience today. This morning, I posted something in Facebook that I personally was involved with and personally helped create. I had 3 or 4 people make comments of it who were involved with it too. Within 10 minutes, Facebook had flagged it as false information and had blocked it from the posting and stuff. And yes, I can appeal it, but this is an instance where I was personally involved with it, and other people who were involved with it responded to it, and Facebook censor, there's no other word on it, the Facebook censor decided it was inappropriate without having any context, anything on it, and blocked it. And I can appeal, but appeals always take 3 or 4 days. And so the time value of that information is gone. And you see that. And that's one of the challenges with social media. And I have been, like Donald, I have actually been kicked off of Twitter for a week with something that was actually not even my information. It was a retweet that offended someone. And you see that happening. And I see that with a lot of my friends too. But if you look at some of the reflections of social media, though, it is incredibly addictive. There's self-image issues all over. It can make you lonely. It can make you have that fear of missing out I talked about earlier. And one of the things in studies that has come out on social media is it drives more sadness than happiness, which I think is a very interesting result of studies, and it affects mental health and others like that. But, the other thing I like to say on it is that if I put on my business hat and totally look at it from a business standpoint, some of the things that social media has done have been really good. It helps people who are marketeers address branding in very different ways. And I know almost no marketeers who doesn't use social media now. But from an analyst view, from a person looking at it, social media actually has the ability to help us uncover industry trends in real time. And it's actually pretty good about that in many. It also gives you, in some instances, a more comprehensive competitive analysis platform than I've been able to use in the past. And this is one that is really non-obvious. Social media actually gives you the opportunity for better customer service. There's times when I couldn't get customer service to do anything, and I've gone out to social media, and I have, between all my social media, it's probably about 50,000 followers. Boy, I had pretty good customer service after I went out, and they began getting feedback. And it's also really good when I want to go and position myself over competition. So it's a marketing link. It also, social media helps me build ways to increase my SEO on my websites because of backlinks from social media. And it also helps me humanize my brand. It's just a few of the things that we see as we look at it in the business context. So social media is not always necessarily social. Social media has all the business context as well. And I, like Rob, I have tried to buy a couple of things through, for example, Facebook, really very unsatisfied with it, and will not do that anymore. You know, I find I have to do enough research and stuff to go deeper. That's just not worth the convenience of clicking on it and ordering it in, for particular, Facebook. But you see those and how it goes. I think the biggest challenge I have with social media is being able to see the contacts that I want to see their information on. I'm amazed on people, for example, when I wish them happy birthday and go to their own homepage in social media, the number of posts they've put up that I have not seen, and some that I would have wanted to see. Uh, and that is one of the other areas of how to tweak those algorithms, how to be able to go and say, these are the ones I want to see all the time, regardless of what's going on. And rather than have a social media algorithm decide who I can see and who I cannot see. Uh, that to me is one of the biggest challenges that social media has to address from a consumer standpoint.
Because even the algorithm seems to mess up the kind of banning idea as well. Because I know the network's been banned. I think I've been banned once or twice as well. But it seems like you were talking about a person that's making that judgment. A lot of times it seems to be an algorithm that is got some key search words. And I've actually worked in education and education testing, so I know how those search words work and all of that. And they just hear the keyword, and it might not even be a major part of whatever the dialogue was about either, but they just hear the keyword and then they automatically knock you off because they have got whatever those words are. But it looks like you guys have talked about that, Donald.
They're using deep learning, but regardless, you're exactly right. There's 350,000 tweets a minute, so there's no person looking at them. It is possible that people report you, and so once they report you, then somebody looks at it, and so people gang up to report you if they don't like you, and that's one of the things that will happen. It's gamed that way, but remember that they make the most money if they show you tweets that you're going to like. Okay, and so what they're doing is that they're looking at the kind of tweets that you like the most, and then they're looking at everyone on Twitter, say for an instance, and they're saying, okay, this kind of tweet is the most like the tweets that this particular person likes. So we're going to show this person those tweets because it's the most likely that this person is going to like those tweets. And then when you like those tweets, the person who made the tweets gets a like, so they get that little shot of dopamine. So then they get more addicted to the platform, and it's completely mindless. I really want to point out too that when you get to something like COVID, that the government and science may actually coincide. There are facts about COVID. It's not completely opinion. I personally subscribe to the New England Journal of Medicine, Science, Nature, and other journals like that. And you would be amazed at how many research articles there are about the vaccines and COVID and masks and things like that. I mean, just every week there's half a dozen, and so it isn't just a matter of like trusting Dr. Fauci or something like that. I mean, there's a vast amount of research that basically crosses with each other. It cross confirms each other. One person tries one thing and sees if it works, and then somebody else tries something else. So there are things that it's not really just, an opinion. I mean, science is never absolutely certain, but sometimes the probabilities get very, very, very high. But I think your example is wonderful because the question gets to be is, okay, here is something that we can't be absolutely certain about, which is everything in the world. We can never be absolutely certain about anything, really. But we're certain enough that it would be very, very, very certain that it would be damaging to people to do this, and it would be helpful to people to do this. So these people are putting out on that you should do this thing that is damaging. So the social media platform knows that these people are putting out stuff that's actually going to hurt people and harm people. You know, I mean, it's not as dramatic as being a pedophile, but it's something they know is going to hurt people. So do they or don't they have a responsibility to, like, at least inform people that this is something that could possibly harm them, like the warning on a cigarette pack or something like that? I mean, I'm not going to say that I know the answer to that. I think it's an incredibly complicated question, and it's something that we don't really know for sure, because what can wind up happening is that on social media, what can wind up happening is if you do that, then social media can start forming groups of people who believe that they're being lied to, and that the warnings are actually part of some sort of a conspiracy to harm them. They can get together on social media and ignore everybody else, so they don't see any information that contradicts what it is that they believe, and get together and just reinforce each other day in and day out, and the warnings don't do anything. They actually make things worse. So and I'm just going to finish like with one other thing that Mark said that I think is really important, is that you could be super, super sneaky, because the images and things like that, they can be hidden in a different message. In other words, you could be saying one thing, but the images are actually telling you a different story. And so you can change people's beliefs by in very, very, very sneaky ways. And so the ability to actually regulate this I don't think it really exists. I will say that I just looked it up, and still the majority of people in Russia believe the war is a good thing, and that Russia is actually saving Ukraine from Nazis and all that kind of stuff. So to a degree it works, but I know if history, the Russians did the propaganda forever, and then eventually it completely corroded and the Soviet Union collapsed. And so I would guess that over time that the information, they won't be able to control the information, and it'll continue to corrode, and the attempts to completely confuse and lie to people will fail, but at least temporarily they're succeeding. But propaganda is a lot more subtle, and it doesn't have to just be the way that Russians do it. It's advertisers do it, and people in lots of complicated ways. And I think we don't really know how to control it. But I love social media, and I've learned, like, I love TikTok. I learned so much from people that the people that do it are so brilliant. If you, in 3 minutes, they can tell stories that just blow my mind. I just can't even comprehend how brilliant these people are that can do that. So,
hey, Donald, you mean we don't get the pretty girl with the toothpaste? Because I thought that was part of what social media always told you, is that you got the pretty girl with the toothpaste, even though The pretty girl has nothing to do with what is being sold in the true space.
I don't get any dancing girls or anything like that. Like I've got this one, she's a PhD, she's a doctor with then a PhD in epidemiology who explains COVID, for an instance. And, you know, I've just got these just absolutely brilliant people. And it shows you what you want to see. And so I just wind up with this just amazing people who will just in 3 minutes just absolutely knock me out. I mean, I wish we could get some of them on the show, but you know, it takes like days to make those 3-minute videos, so it's not easy. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's not an easy situation, and we have to be iterative. But the companies, they can't know what's going on, and we don't have a way yet of knowing. The algorithms are an attempt, but as we all have discussed, they fail. They're not working. They don't work very well. They can be gamed. They flag things that are wrong. They get the wrong. They cut people off for the wrong reason. They do. They miss things that they should be getting. And there's a lot of debate whether the things that they're trying to get are actually the right things. We're a long way from developing the kind of artificial intelligence we need to be able to do it, partially because technical reasons and partially because we just don't understand what it is we're looking for. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you. This is actually a great debate, and especially from today's discussions, I personally learned many things, especially for social media. I'm sure our audience, especially our youth community, they will learn many things about social media. Thank you, Professor Rob, Professor David Smith, and Professor Donald for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And next week, we are collaborating with Pod TV. So our content also distribute in Roku and Amazon and some other places. So hopefully we will get more interesting audience from around the world, and our contribution will be more valuable for global community. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you, bye bye, and take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Always nice to see you. Thanks, Sharif. Bye.